Hello everyone, today we will be creating a Pong game in Python. So just the classic Pong game that you're used to playing a lot. And we're going to do this by using the Pygame module. So this is what the final game is going to look like. We're going to have the two players here, and this will be the ball that you're going to play the game with. So let's start by importing time. Import also the random module and import Pygame as PG and sys, just like we did last time, and also from pygame.locals import everything. Okay, now let's initialize the Pygame module, so pg.init, and let's create the clock, so fps equals pg.time.clock. Okay, so this is pretty standard stuff that we did last time as well. Now let's just define our colors. So let's define white 255, 255, 255, blue, which is 0, 0 and 255, red, which is equal to 255, 0 and 0, and orange, which will be equal 255, 165 and 0, and then we have green 0, 0 and 255, or actually green is 0, 255, 0, and then black, which is basically all zeros. Okay, so here we are just defining our colors that we're going to be using for our game. And now let's go ahead and define some global variables that we're going to need. So first of all, let's define the width, which is going to be 600, the height, which is going to be 400. These are the pixel sizes of the window. Then we have the ball size, which will be equal to 20. The p underscore w, which will be the paddle dimensions. So this will be 8, and this should be 80. Okay, and this ball size here is the radius of the ball that we're going to use later. And now let's just do let's also declare a half pw, which is going to be pw divided by 2, and also a half ph, which is going to be p underscore h divided by 2. Okay, so we're going to need this later. Oh, and actually this is meant to be an h here. Okay, so then we just need the ball location, which is going to be the two coordinates that we are on the screen. And then we are also going to need a ball speed. So we have a speed at the x-axis and another speed at the y-axis. So it's easier to store the speed of the different axes at different variables and not just one speed for everything. So then let's go ahead and define the paddle speeds. So pad1 underscore speed, let's just set this to 0, and pad2 underscore speed, which will also be equal to 0. Then let's also keep track of the score, so scr1 0 and scr2 which will be equal to 0, or actually let's just do scr and scr1. Okay, so now let's define the game window and create the actual game window that we're going to be playing at. So screen equals to pg.display.setMode, and now let's use the w and h for the width and height of the window, then 0 and 32, just some pretty standard flags that we used last time as well. Now let's set the caption, so pg.display.set caption, and let's set this equal to Pong. Okay. Then let's just do time.sleep5, so let's wait for 5 seconds, and then let's just add pg.quit to just see if it's running correctly. Okay, so we can see that we have a blank window that just waits for 5 seconds before terminating. Okay, this is to be expected so far. So now let's go ahead and define a function which is going to create a ball, and we'll also update the ball speed parameter. So we will use this function in our main program, in our main loop, to generate a new ball each time a player fails to hit the ball and it goes off the screen. So let's just delete this part of the code, and let's do define ball create, and let's use a write here. So this write over here will just decide if the ball is going to be thrown right or left, and it's going to be random. So now let's just add a global ball location and ball speed, and now let's just set the ball location equal to the middle of the screen, so w divided by 2 and h divided by 2. Now let's set the horizontal speed to random dot rand range 2 and 4. So this is going to create a random number between 2 and 4, and also create a vert which will be equal to random dot rand range 1 and 3. So now if the right is equal to false, what we want to do is set the horizontal speed to the opposite of this the current value. So this means that it will go to the opposite direction. And now let's do ball speed equals, and then store these values as the speed, so hors and minus the vertical, because if you remember, minus and under 0 value means that we're going upwards on the y-axis, if you remember the way that the grid is set. So you can use this now to draw some circles. So as an exercise, what you could do is use a for loop with a draw.circle method, and just draw multiple circles for each color that we have defined. Just make sure to practice with something like that. Now we need to create a method which will initiate the score for its player, the paddle positions, and will also create the ball on the board. So let's define this. So let's go ahead and do a definition of the run method. So this method is going to make a global paddle position 1 or paddle 1 position, paddle 2 position, pad 1 speed, pad 2 speed, and then we need the SCR1, so the score of player 1, and then what we need to add is SCR1 and SCR2. Okay, so we're just going to use all of these variables later. Now let's go ahead and do a paddle 1 position equal to the half PW, and let's do this minus 1 and h divided by 2. So this is going to be the paddle 1 position. Now let's go and define paddle 2 position, which is going to be equal to W plus 1 minus the half PW, and also let's do h divided by 2. Now the SCR1 is going to be 0, and the SCR is going to be 0. Now we have to check if random.randRange, so we're picking a random number between 0 and 2, and if it's 0, then we're going to do a ball create with true here. Now else we're going to do a ball create false. So we're sort of randomly choosing whether the ball is going to go right or left. And so as an exercise, what you could do is you could define a method which we can call to print the position of the paddle while we're playing the game. So you would sort of get the output here at your normal output place. So you could do that in order to print the positions of your paddles. Now let's go ahead and define our most important method called build. We will break it down into small pieces to understand what's going on, but the main purpose of this code is to draw everything on the screen and keep updating the player paddles, the ball, and any score updates. So this is the core kind of our game. So let's go ahead and define build. And this will take as a parameter a canvas here. So in here, let's just do a global paddle 1 position, paddle 2 position, ball location, ball speed, SCR1, SCR R, and also we need the paddle 1 speed and the paddle 2 speed. Okay, now let's do a canvas dot fill black. So this is our game surface that we're adding here as an argument to the build method. Now let's start to draw some lines for the paddles. So these paddles are going to these lines are going to represent the for the paddles, the middle of the screen. So we're kind of creating an effect of like playing in a field. So pg.draw.line. Let's do a canvas, white, and now let's do w divided by 2 and 0 here, and let's also do w divided by 2 and h. So this will draw a line at the middle, and it will be a thickness of 1. Let's also do another line, so pg.draw.line. We will draw on the canvas with the color white again, and this time the coordinates will be, so the first point will be the PW and 0, and the second will be the P underscore W and H here and 1. So these are the 2 points to draw the line. And let's also draw, so pg.draw.line on our canvas with the color white again, and this time we want to do W minus PW and 0, and here we also want to do W minus PW, so the X doesn't change, and H here, and also a thickness of 1. And finally let's draw a circle, so pg.draw.circle, and we want to draw on the canvas with the color white again, and this time let's just draw at the middle, so W divided by 2 and also H divided by 2. And now we want to use 7 here as a radius and also 1 as the width or the thickness. So now if I just run the build function, and also let's do a time.sleep 5, you are going to see, or actually let's use here our canvas, which is our screen. Now let's try it. We also have to put them on the screen, so we should do pg.display.update. So now if we run this, you can see that these are the lines that we drew. So here we have our circle in the middle, here is our line in the middle, and then we have the lines on the left and right. As you can see, we have these 3 lines and the circle in the middle. So this was sort of to make it feel like it's an actual table to play Pong and not just a blank screen. So now let's move the paddle on the screen each time the build function will be called. So let's delete the PG display update. We will do this later. And now what we can do is we can say if the paddle 1 position 1 is greater than the half ph. So remember, 1 here represents that we're talking about the y value, and paddle position 1 is less than h minus half ph. So this just reassures that our y is between the half position h and the h minus half position. So we're just making sure that our paddle is within the boundaries that it must be in. And then if this is true, we want to do a paddle 1 position 1 plus equals pad 1 speed. So all you need to know is that here we're taking cases to adjust the ball or the paddle speed. So let's do else if paddle 1 position 1. And remember, we're using 1 here because we can only move the paddles in the y position. It doesn't make sense to allow them to move in the x dimension. So let's do paddle 1 position 1 is going to be equal to half ph and paddle 1 speed greater than 0. So if this is true, we're going to do a paddle 1 position plus equals to paddle 1 speed. And you could do this as an or. You could have one if statement with many ors here. I'm just doing this so we can be more clear and not having like a really long line over here. This wouldn't be very practical right now. So paddle position 1 is equal to h minus the half ph, and the paddle 1 speed is less than 0. So if this is true, we are making sure that the paddle position 1 plus equals our paddle 1 dot speed. So essentially what we're doing here is we're taking 3 cases where the positions is going to be adjusted by our speed. So the speed can be either a positive or negative number, and this just indicates in which direction our paddle is going to move towards. Now what we're going to do is we're going to repeat this thing for the other paddle. So let's copy and paste that. Now all we need to change here is we need to change the 1s with 2. So now we're talking about the paddle 2. So just go ahead and manually replace everything here. And I think that I'm done now. Okay, so now we're just taking control of both of these paddles here. So now let's change the location of the ball as well. We're done with the paddles, let's just change the location of the ball. So ball location 0, this is now the x value of our ball's location. So plus equals, let's make this an integer of ball speed 0. So we're taking the speed of the ball and we're rounding it up to the next integer. and we are adding it to the ball location. So let's do the exact same thing for the y value as well. Plus equals int of ball speed 1. So essentially what we're doing here, we are adding our speed to the location. So whatever our speed is, this is how fast the location is going to change. So now let's draw the ball and paddle on the screen, because now we know their positions. So let's just draw them on the screen. So first of all, pg.draw.circle, and we want to always draw on our canvas with the color blue now, because we're talking about the ball. Now we're using the ball location as the coordinates of the ball. Fair enough. And we're using 20 as the radius and 0. So now let's go ahead and draw our paddles here. And the coordinates here are a little bit complicated, so just try to follow along. I'm not going to be explaining them, but just try to copy this. And these are just the 4 points that make up the paddles. So pg.draw.polygon, and we're just going to draw on the canvas with the color orange. And now let's use here the paddle position 0 for the x minus the half pw, and for the y let's do a paddle 1 position 1 minus half ph. So this is our first point. Now let's add the second one. The second one is going to be paddle position 0 minus half pw, and for the y let's do paddle position 1 here, plus half ph. Okay, so I just moved this over in order for you to be able to see the this point here. So next we have the paddle position 0 plus the half pw, and for the y we have a paddle position 1 plus the half ph, and now our final point is going to be a paddle position 0 plus our half pw, and the final y value is going to be paddle position 1 minus the half ph. So hopefully this is correct now. Hopefully I haven't made any mistake. So this just makes sure that we're drawing the paddle with these 4 points on the screen. Okay, now we have to repeat the same thing for the other paddle. So just go ahead and copy this line and paste it over here, and all you need to change now is you need to change paddle 1 to paddle 2 everywhere here. So apart from that, there is nothing else that you really need to change here. All of the other parameters will still be the same for both paddles. You just need to use the different coordinates for the different paddles. Okay, and this is it. And also you have to add another parameter here, which is the thickness. Just add a 0 here and a 0 here at the end of your line. Now you can see it. So I'm just adding a 0 here at the end of both lines, and this indicates the width. So just add it like so. Now let's go ahead and decide what we do when we hit the ball. So let's just do an if statement here of an integer of the ball location, and this is the y value, and this needs to be less or equal to the ball size. So if this is true, this means that we've hit the wall, and what we need to do now is do a ball speed 1 is equal to the opposite value. So we're sort of bouncing it off at the same at the opposite direction. So if this is true, this happens. Now if int ball location 1 is greater or equal to, or this needs to be outside, greater or equal to age plus 1 minus ball size. And remember, this is true only if we hit the upper and lower walls. The left and right walls are going to trigger something else. This is just for the top and bottom. So if this is true, we're going to check, we're going to do ball speed 1 is equal to minus ball speed 1. So we're sort of bouncing it off at the other direction if one of these are true. And what you could do to make this better is you could do an OR statement here and add all of this code here and just delete this. But in order to make this more clear and easier to understand, I'm not going to be using really complicated if statements. This program is already complicated enough on its own. So now let's control the speed of the ball if it hits the paddle of the player. So if, and this is quite a long if statement as well. So if the ball location 0, so if the x of a ball is less or equal to the ball size plus pw, and our integerized ball location 1 is in range, paddle 1 position 1 minus the half ph, comma, paddle position 1 plus our half ph, comma 1. So, and actually I added an extra d here. So this means that essentially if we hit the paddle of a player, so this here, as you can see, we are checking if we are in the range of the paddle, and we're checking if we hit the ball. And what happens now, we want to do a ball speed 0 equal to minus ball speed 0. So we're sort of reversing that, and the ball speed 0 is going to be times equal 1.1. So we're sort of increasing the speed with each hit to make this more challenging. Okay, and also let's do ball speed 1 times equals 1.1 to make this sure, to make sure this is the same number. And now let's take an else if approach. So else if the ball location 0 is less or equal to the ball size plus pw, we're doing scr underscore r plus equals 1, and we're creating another ball because the last one was thrown off the screen, and set this to true. So what this is for, we are checking if we have hit it with our left paddle or if we missed with our left paddle. And if this is true, we're just creating another ball with a direction to the right. But now we have to do the exact same thing for the right paddle, for the other paddle as well. So let's just copy this here. Let's paste it, and all we need to change now is we need to change this value here. So if this now is greater or equal to w plus 1 minus the ball size, and what we need to do here is also let's do minus p underscore w, and now what we need to change here is change paddle 1 to paddle 2, minus half ph, and paddle 2 here, and yes, this is exactly the same now. So this here stays the same because what we're doing is we're changing the direction of the speed, and we're also multiplying this by 1.1 to slowly increase it. And now in the else if part, what we're going to do is make this greater or equal to w plus 1 minus ball size minus pw. So we're checking if we left the screen, and what we're doing now is we're setting the score 1 to plus equals 1, and we're creating a ball with a false. So this ball will just go towards the left direction. Now let's just print the score on the screen. So we're done with what happens. Let's just go back a bit. So we're making the lines here at the middle as you saw before. This here just checks and changes the speed of the paddle or the location of the paddle. This does the same for paddle 2. This here adjusts the position of the ball depending on the speed. Now here we're drawing our paddles. Here we are changing the ball's direction if it hits the upper or the lower wall, and these last if statements are responsible to change the state of the game if something happens, like the ball is off to one direction, or if the ball hits the paddle. This here is handled by these if statements. So now let's just print the score on the screen. So let's create a font. So my font is equal, or my font 1, okay, is equal to pg.font.sysfont. Now let's use a Comic Sans MS, because why not? And let's use a size of 20. Now let's create the label, which will be equal to my font 1 dot render. This is going to say score plus the string value of the score 1. So apart from that, we're going to have a true here or a 1, whatever you prefer. And now 255, 255, 0. I think this is kind of a yellow now. And also now let's just paste it on the canvas. So canvas.blit, and let's do label 1, and let's do the coordinates 50 and 20, and this is going to say label 1. Okay, so now let's do the same thing for our other label. So we don't have to create another font, we have already created one font. So label 2 is going to equal to my font dot render, and you can actually just remove the 1 here, so because there's not going to be a my font 2. So my font dot render, and we're just going to say here score and the string value of the scr underscore r. Here we're going to use a true, and also again with the yellow color 255, 255 and 0. And finally we're just blitting them on the screen. So canvas.blit label 0, and now the coordinates are going to be 470 and 20. Okay, so the problem I needed to run the run method first, and then build, and then update. So this is the sequence now that we're going to be using. And this just displays this static environment. So these here are the different paddles here. This is our ball in the middle, and this here is the score for each of the two players. Okay, so we're done with this method. Now let's go ahead and move on. So now that we have all of our objects on the screen, we have everything that we need to display, we actually have to make this a playable game. So let's add controls, let's add movement. So first of all, let's add the event or the key handler. So let's define, let me just delete all of this here. Let's define a Keydown method that just takes an event here as a parameter. And this is going to have a global pad1.speed, and pad2 underscore speed. So we're just using the global values. Now we're just looking for the event key. So event.key equals k up. So this is the up arrow key, if you remember. So if we press the up arrow key, this is going to become true. Now let's just do pad2 speed equals to -8. So this is what happens if we press the up arrow key. Now else if the event key is the k dot underscore down. So if we press the down arrow key, we're just going to do pad2 speed equal to 8. So else if the event key is k underscore w, so this is the w key on your keyboard, the pad1 underscore speed is going to change to -8, and then we have else if event dot key equals to k underscore s. So if we press the s key on our keyboard, we're going to set the pad1 speed equal to 8. Okay, so this just controls both of them. The first paddle you control it with the W and S keys, the other paddle you control it with the up and down arrow key. And now let's stop the movement when we release the button. So this Keydown method on its own, it's just going to set a speed, but if you leave if you stop pressing the key, it's just going to keep moving in that direction. So we need to make it stop whenever we release the key. So let's define a key up method that takes an event here. And what this is going to do is let's set the global pad1 speed and pad2 speed. And now let's just check if event.key in kw or ks. So we're just checking if we release the w or s key. And if this is true, we set the speed of pad1 equal to 0. Now else if the event key is in the k up or the k down, so these are the arrow keys, the pad2 speed is set to 0. So we're just resetting the speed to 0 if we release these two keys for each one of the pads. Okay, of the paddles, I'm sorry. Okay, so now all that's left to do is make the game loop. So let's go ahead and so we've defined all of our methods here. Let's go back a little bit. So from the beginning we are importing our libraries, we are initializing Pygame and our clock, we are defining the colors that we would like to use, and here are all the global variables. So for example, the height, the width of our screen, the ball size, the paddles width and height, the ball's location and speed, and our paddle's location and the score of the two players. So after all of these are defined, what we're doing is we are displaying a new window and we're setting the caption to Pong. Then we have our methods. So this here creates a new ball if the previous one was destroyed. The run method initializes everything, so it sets our paddle's positions, it creates a new ball, and so on. And then we have the build method, which we explained this before, but this is the most important one of our methods. It's responsible to display the ball, the score, the lines, and the paddles on the screen. And then we have these two methods that are used to handle the events or the key presses. So this key down just changes the speed, and the key up just resets the speed to 0 in case we stop pressing anything. So now let's go ahead and use all of these methods to actually build our game from scratch. So let's use the run method first to initialize everything. And now let's create our game loop. So while true, we are going to create the event handler first. So for event in pg.event.get, So this is a pretty standard event handler, and all this is going to do is it's going to check for 3 events. So if event.type equals to key down, so if we're pressing a key down, we're just going to use the key down with the event. Now, else if our event type equals to key up, we're just going to use the key up method with the event over here. And now else if event.type equals quit, we're just going to do pg.quit and system exit. So this is the pretty standard pressing the X and quitting kind of event, and this is the key down and key up that we use for controlling our paddles. Now what we need to do next is make a pg.display.update and actually set the FPS tick to 60. Okay, I think our game is complete now. Let's go ahead and run this. Actually, forgot the most important thing. Forgot to add the build on the screen. So this is our most important method. Let's try it again now. Okay, so the program crashed, and the reason why is because here we forgot to add the index of 1. So go to line 72 or wherever you are inside your build method, wherever you are checking for the paddles position. You just add this here if you haven't already. That's just something I forgot to do myself. So now let's go ahead and rerun this and see if it works as it should. Okay, so the game is playable now. The only thing that I see is missing is we need to add the score. So okay, I see that I forgot this as well somewhere else. Okay, so here the paddle position, because I copy pasted all of this thing, you need to change it in both this and this if statement as well. So if you do that, you're not going to have any problems. Let me just rerun this as well. And now let me just figure out why the score is not updating, and let's get back to you. Okay, so there was no problem with the score, I just hadn't lost yet. So if you can see I leave the ball go in this direction, the score is updated. So right now is 1-1. If I leave the ball go out, you can see now it's 1-2. So there you go, our game is complete and we fixed all of the bugs that occurred. And if I play a little bit right now, you can see that the speed is just going to start to go up. So each time I hit the ball with one of the paddles, the actual speed of the ball is going to increase. If you remember, we times it with 1.1, so it's going to increase 10% each time we hit the paddle, and eventually it's going to start being really fast, and this is the point where one of the players is going to lose a point. So as you can see, I just lost against myself. So it's a pretty fun game to play alone or with a friend, and it also teaches you a lot about Pygame. Now there is a possibility that you might still be confused about the coordinates here. These are just the coordinates that draw the paddles. You don't really need to worry about that. I mean, if you were doing something like this on your own, you would probably measure it, and you could also do like a specific amount of pixels if you measured it on your own. So it's not that big of a deal. I could just find out what this value is and draw it on my own, and so on. So it's not something that you really need to keep track about. If you have any other questions, just review this code again and try to understand. Mainly the build method is the most important one. It's a little more complicated than the rest, and also longer. But that's it. I think it's a pretty straightforward game. The game loop here is pretty simple, so we just hit run one more time and show you what happens. So first of all, the run method initializes everything on our screen. as you can see, the run method. And then inside of our game loop, we're building the screen, which essentially changes all of the positions of any objects that we have. Then here we have the event handler, which is responsible to handle any events such as key presses, key releases, and pressing the X to quit. And then we're just updating our screen, and we are checking that the FPS, the frames per second, are 60. And that's basically it. So the whole purpose of the game loop is to just run again and again the build method, and just to check for events. This is the whole purpose of the game loop. So the rest are handled inside of the build method. Okay, that's it. Thanks a lot. Try to make this on your own and see if you can actually do it. And as an exercise, I think it would be more meaningful if you try to add something on your own. So for example, this could be a shape, this could be a feature inside the game that I haven't added, like a power-up or something like that. And you actually don't have to change much here. You could just create another method that is responsible to handle whatever feature you add. And that's basically it. This is all you need to know right now. So just practice, make sure you practice, and read the code again and again, understand the code, because it's really easy to get lost in all of these values and numbers and variables. Just make sure you have a good understanding. That's all. Thanks a lot. I will see you next time.